For 1 hour.
Yeah, is it on? Okay. A very good afternoon, students across India, wherever you are placed. Welcome to this video lecture. And in this video lecture, you will be addressing throughout this session on few aspects of HRM. And when we say of HRM, we say of human resource management. And throughout this entire duration of the syllabus, we will be addressing on areas how it has evolved over a period of time, HRM as a theme, and then also what are the latest in up there. So as we will go on, so I'll try to be as slow yet very comprehensible in whatever I say, and also I'll give in lots of examples to clarify at whatever point we need to discuss this out. Correct? Okay, so the role of human resource management in the organization. Now, every organization you work in, if you're already employed, you already must be aware about it. Or if you are not, then obviously organization definitely has a structure about it, and human resource become the very integrated kind of a domain where it kind of connects all systems, be it the business functions of marketing, business functions of sales, strategic planning, production, manufacturing, audit. So all these things, when they compile and put it together, that is integrated through the system of HRM or human resource management. Okay, so in this session, what we will be, I'll quickly glance through what we will be addressing. The learning outcomes for this session would be: 1. Identifying the historical developments and their impact on HRM, how things have moved on from the last 50 years of people management, and now how we take it into people development as a domain. We'll look into the outlines of development and functions of HRM. We'll look into the roles that an HRM has got to play within an organization and how the roles have changed over a period of time as well. We'll look into the differences between HRM and personal management. So PM or personal management, as it was earlier called, dealing about people functions, be it salary, wages, signing of contract, recruitment, selection, how the roles have changed, how they are significantly different in terms of PM, that is personal management, and how it has evolved towards HRM. We will also look into evaluating the hard and soft aspects or approaches to HRM. So what are hard and soft as far as HRM is concerned, we'll be dealing in as we approach, and also understand how diversity is an issue in HR practice. That means in today's changing environment, I hope you're aware that if you're already employed, you already are aware that the dynamics of the industry, whichever industry that you are working in, is very turbulent, is very vibrant, in the sense that every day things are evolving, emerging, new developments are taking shape. With this in the backdrop, that means the HR or the human resource management also need to evolve, and it really has evolved in the last couple of years very thick and fast. So we'll try to look into these areas one by one. First, the post-70s feature of HRM. So we'll just quickly glance through how have we evolved in the last 50 years. So when we say post-70s, roughly around 50 years, yeah? Okay, so first, when the concept of HRM was very primitive, and in fact, the HRM concept evolved from people functions in the terms of how about managing people. So one of the basic premise that was laid from HRM perspective in those era, say 50 years back, was about a collective bargaining role. When we say collective bargaining role, that means about signing of contract. That means about how much remuneration or wages to be paid. How in a group you can bargain for wages and salaries. That was primarily the function, wherein maybe a trade union, maybe a recognized union of the employees used to have interaction with personal management or people who were into people management. That was primarily the role at that point of time. The other roles being implementer of legislation role. Now, what do you mean by implementer? Implementer means about implementing the legislator role. When we say legislature from a company perspective, it means following the code of conduct that every organization has. Now, every organization definitely has a code of conduct set in by the government rules about be it fundamental rights, then based on the company acts, then based on the state rules, whichever state they belong to, those rules as well, and also what the company thinks is based on the value proposition that the company has, or based on the ethical nature that every organization wants to put it across. They have a legislation or we commonly call as code of conduct for every organization. So the PM's role or HRM's role was to implement whatever was mentioned in the code of conduct as it's happening or not. If it's not, then requisite action needs to be taken. So we have taken two things that the HRM used to do at that point of time. One, the collective bargaining role. Two, the implementer of legislation role. The other being the bureaucratic role. Now, bureaucracy, we all know, or if you're aware about the term, it's about implementation, not only implementation, but also setting up rules within the organization as the organization evolves as well. So, if I am to give an example, a company with 100 employees, the code of conduct and the state legislation and the company rules might be slightly different from the company who is having 10,000 employees. Yes or no? And given this, then based on that factor, the HR person, the person from the PM then is to draft it or redraft it or kind of carve out something new based on not only about the size of the organization, but how the organization also is moving across in the market environment place as well. The third is about bureaucratic role. And the next is the social conscience of business role. Now, when we say social conscience, social has got to do with society. That means how they need to behave, means the employees within the social premise. That means in this case, the company rules and company premises and boundaries. So herein comes lots of things in terms of how do you deal with women employees, how do you deal with superiors, how do you deal with subordinates, how do you deal with colleagues, what is the nature of their communication, on what all grounds, what is the hierarchy through which if at all some mail has to be drafted or if a letter has to be issued, on what grounds, on what levels are they to be displayed and transferred, also is part of social conscience of business role. So one is about the internal, how the employees need to behave in the premise of the company, but also since every employee for any organization is a kind of brand ambassador as well, so his behavior outside of the premise as well goes on to reflect the company's image. So for example, If somebody is from a sales or a marketing team, and if he is going to meet an external client wherein he is out of the premise, but for the client, the person who is representing there, maybe selling a product, making a demonstration of a product, he there represents the company. That means he is the brand ambassador for that company. Having said that, it becomes all the more important that the person is nicely groomed up for that kind of role. So it's not only about selling a product, but also selling an image of the product. So that's where the social conscience part comes in as far as the business role is concerned. And the growing performance improvement role. In the sense, earlier it was mostly about the collective bargaining. But also then things moved out into how the performance needs to be measured, evaluated, appraised, and also then could be rewarded as well. So this is how things changed over a period of time. So a lot of time it's also about business evaluation, which was not maybe the mainstay when it started off with. Because when it started off, the thrust and emphasis was more about following rules and regulations, following rules of conduct. Then it slowly matured into a phase where people are looking for performance. So that's the reason if you see appraisals, as it is more commonly known as today from the HRM perspective, is a very detailed case in lots of organizations where they get into lots of specifics about appraisals as well. So when we speak of appraisals, it's about performance of every individual, and it not only goes down to only team, but performance is evaluated right at the individual level as well. So focus is gone down to the core as well. Now we will try to look into the differences between personal versus human resource management. So if you meet somebody who has worked somewhere in the 90s, 80s, the concept of HR was people never knew an HR manager. People knew, are you from a personal department? That's what it is called to be. So we'll try to understand the difference between the personal versus the human resource management. These days, although they are very synonymously used, but there definitely exists a difference in their roles when it was laid out earlier. Now, HRM can mean a particular philosophy. Now, for the organization, when we say a philosophy, it means their mission, their vision, their values, and their ethics. So when we say a philosophy of an organization, it means all these things. That means what is the company looking forward to maybe another 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. So that's the vision that the company has. And if that is the vision, not only in terms of their goals, but also it's upon what kind of values the company wants to shape up. And different companies have different value systems through which they want to guide and take the company ahead. Maybe after a decade, after 2 decades, 3 decades. So it means a philosophy over here. So if you open out any company's website and going for a home page, you get into every website. If you go into, there's a vision, mission, and value proposition. Now these are drafted, designed, and created by people from HRM in synergy with the head of the organization, who is part of strategic management team, looking into the future, what the company wants to achieve in days to come, or maybe years to come as well. Now, traditional HR functions, if you just quickly go through the PPT, just drop in there, you will see the traditional means what were there conventionally as HR functions. were, number one, performance. So, as we discussed, every individual being assessed, appraised, rewarded. Now, rewarded could be on monetary terms, rewarded could be in career terms, rewarded could be in terms of cross mobility and cross function handling as well. So, performance over here means much larger than only monetary perks. Then HR function, second, if you look into the PPT, it is also about staffing. That means how much the company needs employees based on, so the HR function also looks into job roles, job description, job type, and then based on that of how much to achieve, they look into how many people will be required for a design task. So all this of staffing has got to do with first the understanding and designing the job title, job description, job analysis. We get into recruitment, selection. These all is part of staffing. And as students, you might be aware, or people who have been working, suppose for example, you might be very well aware that attrition is a huge challenge in today's dynamics. You go to any industry, the kind of turnover, but any organized people turnover is what I am mentioning to. It's around of 8 to 12%. This is any across the board, and from 8 to 12%, the attrition ranges till 20-30% as well. So when we say 20-30% of attrition annual, that's a huge size. It also means that the company needs to invest more in terms of invest money in terms of selection, then recruitment. These all things involve cost. And if there is a high attrition, it's always more cost to the company, not only in terms of recruitment selection only, but training them. Plus, you also find that if people leave, not only people leave, people go, but with them goes experience, with them goes knowledge. So that's a critical challenge. We will be addressing this separately when we discuss this part by part. But staffing is definitely one of the key aspects from HR function. Then into change management, a big time challenge, because we all know the code that change is the only constant. And having said that, the change is the only constant. That means we are all changing. The market is changing every day. In fact, every other day it gets changing. So with this changing environment, not only our strategic plan need to be changed, our vision, we need to be more flexible about what we think about it, in the sense that whatever we have set for a decade or two as an organizational vision, we should be enough there in terms of flexibility as well. That means we need to maneuver through as well, yet having a set vision about it. So if having said that, it becomes all the more important that people need to be open for change as well. Now, in the era where we all expect that things should change, but when it comes to people hardly are ready for change, because people love the sameness. People love doing the same thing. So if even for a small changes as well, for example, if I am to relate from an everyday life example, we sleep on the same side as well on our beds. Even to change that pattern becomes a challenge. So that means a mindset revamping is important. So these HR function includes in terms of how to create openness so that the employees are open to the concept of change itself. So change not only means here, it means it could be a change of location for the employee. It means that certain business hubs or topographic location need to be put down because of financial constraint, maybe because of lack of growth providers. That could be possible reason. So it could be change in terms of location. It could be change in terms of technology adaptability. The technology that we were using say around 10, 15 years back, they are redundant these days. So we have new software coming in, we have new things of coming in. For example, the learning as such. Now, we always knew 10, 15 years back, classroom was the only way to learn. But with change and technological change, you see what kind of learning is happening even right away now, isn't it? E-learning has shaped it. So, change is the norm. So, the HR function, the third essential criteria earlier also includes this change management and obviously administration as well. That means that all the functions with related to admin, maybe designing a salary, maybe about circulating letters, maybe about the accounts people, it all forms part of administration. These were the four traditional HR functions. 1, performance. 2, staffing. 3, change management. 4, administration. Now we'll try to distinguish one by one between HRM and PM or personal management. If you look into your PPT one by one, if you see on the first parameter, time and planning. So on the left hand side you find the parameter on which the difference we are going to assign, and on the right hand side we have put in personal column and HRM column so that we can clearly see the difference between these. So when we see of time and planning, in personal, if you see, it is short term, reactive, ad hoc, marginal. That means when we look at the personal functions with related time, it was always about ad hoc. That means if this happens, what to do. So ad hoc is about just a makeshift kind of arrangement, a reactive kind of mechanism. The vision was actually short-sighted. It was more of a reactive approach when we talk about PM in relation to time and management. Vis-a-vis, if you see HRM, it's about long-term. It's about proactivity. It's about decision based on strategic mapping and integrated. So we are not looking only for the code of conduct as a guiding parameter to make a decision from an HRM perspective, but it's holistic. We take all business functions into the loop and then take a decision. So it's long term, it's proactive, and it's strategic as well. Second parameter, if you see on the left hand side, it's about the parameter being psychological contract. So from a personal management perspective, it was always about compliance, means is the employee adhering to the norms or not. But if you see the HRM, the newer concept, it's about commitment. It's about seeking commitment from people around, looking into not only about organizational goals, but getting into individual goals as well. So getting commitment becomes the key. So it's more about ownership and responsibility these days when we speak of HRM. Then the third parameter, if you see, the control system. So when we see control systems as the parameter, 1, external. Now the controls were external. So it's about rules, it's about regulations, it's about code of conduct when we see of personal. But when we see of HRM, it's about self-control. That means that's where in HRM the concept of training has come up very thick and fast in the last couple of decades, wherein it's about ownership, it's about responsibility, it's about how the person needs to behave, deal, decide in a particular situation. It's about self-control. The other parameter is employee relationship. Now, if you see from a personal management, it was more about, it was a very low trust affair. It was more about collective bargaining. It was pluralistic. So, means group to a group. That means personal management had a team, maybe 4 or 5. There used to be a personal manager. That could be a GM personal as well. So, there was a personal manager team and then they used to interact with the employees put together, maybe in a form of trade union. That's where the collective bargaining, and that's where they kind of used to associate themselves with. But when you look at the HRM, it's about unitarist. Unitarist means single. It's about single individual getting in association with the organization, and that's where the contract is won or with the company. And it's about high trust. So moving from a low trust kind of background, we move to a high trust kind of environment. The next parameter for difference, the structure and system. So from a personal perspective, it was more bureaucratic, mechanistic, centralized, and very formal. That means this was very much called as transactional. That means it was always there. This is the rules we followed. This is to be done exactly as it is. As far as personal management was concerned, and if you see the HRM, it's more organic, it's more holistic, it's more rounded, it's flexible. So it's not only about rules, but it's also about why those rules are essential. How there's an individual responsibility towards following the rules, and what would happen if rules are followed, and what are the kind of drawbacks that if you don't follow the rules. So it's more about individual responsibility that the HRM wants to assign to the individuals concerned. Now if you go to the roles of both this department, the PM and the HRM. If you see PM, the roles were specialist or professional roles. But if you see the HRM, it's largely integrated in a management. So if you see earlier PM or personal management was a separate function altogether. It was just like any other department like sales or marketing or manufacturing. But if you see HRM has definitely evolved, wherein it is that function which is connected to each and every business function, or SBUs as we call it, strategic business units. And when that comes in, then it is really integrated. So if an HRM takes a decision, so lots of inputs come in from various business units in terms of marketing, in terms of sales, in terms of admin, in terms of overseas operations. Based on that, the vision is laid, the mission are laid, the code of conduct is laid, the area of development is laid as well. So it's largely integrated in management, HRM. The evaluation criteria, if you see, from a PM perspective, it is cost minimization. So it was always about volume and cost. So how cost could be reduced? So it was about bulk business, volume business is being done. So more the better was the rationale or the philosophy when you speak of personal management. But if you see of HRM, then it's more about utilization. It's about optimization is the correct word if I'm to use it. So when we speak of optimization, that means it's about humans are considered as a resource. That's where the human resource management comes in the word. So every individual is considered as a resource for utilization. Now when we consider resource, that means that needs to be optimized. That means it could be maximized, it could be flexible, it could be laying out a detailed plan for individual resource, so that if he or she as an individual is optimized, maximized, then we have an asset for the organization. Now, this being an asset for the organization is important, isn't it? Because then it's not about only cost effectiveness, it's also about how much we are getting from each individual in terms of not only performance. Yes, performance is one of the criteria, maybe the top criteria, but also in terms of his behavior, in terms of his contribution, in terms of his flexibility, for drawing out a career plan for the individual within the organization, maybe giving add-on functional or resources needed to upgrade the individual, maybe for joining a course or maybe joining a training or funding a training. All these aspects comes under maximizing the individual resource. The few other dimensions or bifurcations of this difference being contract. Now, if you see from a personal management perspective, it is carefully delineated of written contracts. So, there are definitely contracts, black and white. Now, in HRM, yes, there is a contract, there is a signed MOU, Memorandum of Understanding as it's more commonly called. But when we spoke about asset, when we speak of human resource, when we speak of optimizing that resource, it's about going beyond the contract. It's about over delivering. It's about how we can get maximum from the individual, and when we get maximum from the individual, they give it back to the person as well. Maybe in terms of perks, or maybe in terms of promotions, or whatever it is. The other point of difference, if you see the PPT, are rules. Now, in personal management, the importance of devising clear rules mutually. That means the rules laid out were absolute black and white. It was clear to the core. In HRM, the rules become slightly kind of flexible. They look into the perspective of can-do outlook. Now, impatience with rules, that means we're looking for beyond. That means it's not only about rules, but also looking for possibilities. What else? It's about all the configuration. What else a person can do? What if this is not achievable? What else? It's about exploring new avenues for the individual where his potentials grow and blossom and flourish. The third point, guide to management action. In guide to management action, if you see from a personal perspective, it's about procedure. It was always about a clear, drawn-out procedure. If this is the action, if this happens, say for example, if an employee goes in wants to take a leave of 2 days, he gives the leave application to the personal management and to his line manager or to the immediate reporting superior. So if leave is sanctioned, this is what happens. If it is not, then what is the other methodology? So it's a clear, drawn out procedural thing as far as guide to management action is concerned. If you see from an HRM perspective, it's about business needs. So it's not about only the leave and the procedure. Yes, there are procedures laid out in HRM as well, but looking into lots of aspects like their business exigencies is what we commonly call that what are the business need at this point of time. So if it's a lean period from business for any particular domain or any organization, then leaves could be procured at point of time. And if it is not, then it's an individual responsibility to understand that might be this is not the right time to take leave. So it's about individual ownership as well. So it's about identifying the business needs and getting this into the individual person as well. So when we call it getting to the DNA of an individual, and that's where in the true sense people really go on to become an asset for an organization. So if you see the other aspect of difference, the behavioral referent. Now when we say of behavioral referent, that means what kind of behavior appreciated, which are not or prohibited or cannot or must not do. If you see from a PM perspective, they are norms, customs and practices are the guidelines based on which this is done. Whereas in HRM, if you see, these are based on mission and values. So we have one hand a procedural thing that we have from a personal perspective, but from an HRM perspective, it's much larger than these procedures. It's about a larger cause. So So it's about vision, mission, values, even ethics about the organization. So looking from a broader dimension is what HRM gives. The managerial task vis-a-vis labor, that means the outlook, what is the management style, if I am to call it, if this is the guiding, if this is the differentiating parameter, then from a personal perspective, it's about monitoring, it's about the manager's, the supervision stance or the management style of people handling what is about monitoring, whether are they doing it or not, if not, what measures to be taken, drill it down. So that was the philosophy about monitoring. HRM evolved into nurturing. That means it was more about, we speak in HRM about family bonding. An organization as a family, it's about nurturing, developing, helping, collaborating, cooperating, challenging. So it's about all those aspects have evolved in any organization from an HRM perspective about nurturing and developing. And that's why we speak about family bonds within the organization. So when we have a good structured unit as family kind of relationship within organization, and that comes with period of time, you will find that the employee goes beyond the call of the duty. Then he is not looking for the signed contract, how many hours of work, or this is not my job. If a family kind of bonding is established from an HRM perspective, which is their role as well of nurturing and developing, then it's more about grooming them. Then they go more often beyond the call of the duty, understanding that's our responsibility. Just for example, in family or any family, we need not be told what to be done, isn't it? In our own family, we just take the call because we know it's our individual responsibility to do so. The same applies when we have family structured mechanism in an organization as well, and that comes through nurturing and developing. The nature of relations. If you see the nature of relations from a personal perspective and HRM, it's more pluralist. Means they are looking as groups, as entities, as bodies, as far as PM is concerned or personal management is concerned. But if you see in HRM, it's more unitarian. Unitarian means single. So single-handedly means they are taken as individually. So when we say of nurturing and grooming, that means it's not about a team only. Then the team is broken down and looked as individuals. So how that's why I mentioned earlier that how an individual career growth plan is also planned in good structured organization, where that's the role of HRM, where individually nurturing and development plan is concerned, where you must have heard this concept of mentoring, wherein if a new person joins an organization, he definitely has lots of inhibitions. He's skeptical about lots of things. So while induction itself, somebody from the other department is assigned to this person. He's a person different from his line of hierarchy, so that he or she provides the support function to this new employee. Now, if this is done, and this you'll find in good structured organization. Now, if this is done, you will find that the new employee, just in his induction phase itself, he will find pretty much of ease with the environment, and he's kind of very smooth about his operations. So he will like to have this concept about mentoring as well. So that's where unitarian kind of role comes in as far as the nature of relation between the employee and the employer is concerned. Conflict. So whenever people are there, definitely conflict is there, or chance of conflict is there, to more appropriately call it so. So when conflict happens, what is the style of operation? So in PM or personal management, it was more about institutionalized. That means the conflict resolution was happening from the base of how the groups kind of, it used to be discussed as forums, as groups, as trade unions or as bodies. That's what we discuss in life. But if you see from an HRM perspective, that since we have discussed the unitary, it's more of a unitarian. So the groupism is discouraged, is de-emphasized, and it's more about not only about nurturing individually but also dealing with individuals as individuals single-handedly. The strategic difference between these two are key relationships. How are the relationships in personal management or IR, industrial relations? You'll find it was about labor management. So it's about wages, so that's what labor, people used to take it as the blue collar and the white collar. So labor management came in, whereas in HRM the concept changed. The employees were not considered as a labor but as a customer. Now what kind of customer? The internal customer. So that also means that the employee is respected, honored and taken care of. So he is called the internal customer. So for HR person, these are called internal customers. Every employee to each other employee is an internal customer because they are interrelated. Every business function is interdependent on other functions. For example, a sales team definitely depends on the marketing team. The marketing team has a definitely clear relationship with the strategic team. The strategic team definitely gets aligned with the finance team. The finance team gets in touch with the manufacturing team. So there are lots of integration, isn't it? So if one business function or SBU, strategic business unit, relates to the other, definitely they are customers for each other. That means we are honoring and respecting employees within the organization as well, unlike earlier where it was just a labor task force. The third parameter, if you see the next parameter, is initiative. Now what kind of initiatives, the prime difference if you see from a personal perspective, it's about a piecemeal, wherein piecemeal means it's about that particular aspect, it's about that particular time, that moment. Piecemeal is that particular point when you look at the personal management. But if you see the HRM, it's integrated. So any initiative that is taken by an HRM, that is not in isolation. They are not watertight compartments. They are integrated as one, so that every decision that is taken that influences each other. That means they come from a window of cross-functioning of SBUs. So that's where also things like employee engagement comes in, where the inputs are procured from various strategic units, so that based on these engagements, lots of inputs come in, and based on that, the HR takes an initiative. Corporate plan, the next point of difference. If you see from a personal IR perspective, it's marginal too. That means the business function, whichever people they want to represent, it's very marginal. It's kind of related to in somehow. It's a kind of peripheral relationship to call it. But if you see from an HRM perspective, it is a central thing. So HRM is not separate as was personal management some years back, a few decades back. There was a separate house, just like a marketing unit or a business unit was concerned. But these days, HRM is a central unit connecting all these units. Speed of decision, obviously, if you see personal management or IR was pretty slow in its approach, whereas HRM, if you see, it's fast because since it's an integrated thing, so get to know lots of things, so the decision is fast as well. The line management part of difference between these two, if you see the management role, it was more from a personal perspective transactional. Transactional means whether it's followed or not, kind of. In HRM, it's about transformational. So we speak about, when we speak of transformational, we speak of behavioral changes. We speak of attitude development. We speak of competency development based on skills. We speak of confidence enhancement. We speak of self-esteeming. Uh, we speak of showing every individual the next level. So that's where transformational comes in as far as HRM is concerned. Key managers or designations they call personal IR depart specialists, whereas in HRM they are general manager, business manager, line managers, the bifurcation. Communication, if you see as the point of difference, from a personal IR perspective was indirect, whereas in HRM it was very straight, direct to the individuals because it's one-on-one. Standardization, if you see, it was high. For example, parity an issue. That means a difference. It was standardization was not, since it was dealing with a group, then it was all kind of generalized. So if you take an example, say for example wages as such. So the difference on which the appraisal used to happen or the wage hike used to happen was the tools that we used to use earlier, like maybe a bell curve, when it was more generalized, standardized. But if you see in HRM, the standardization is low. For example, the difference is pretty big in terms of clarity. Since it goes to individual point, then obviously the functions are different. The price to management skills, if you see from a personal IR perspective, it's about negotiation. So we always have heard about the era where strikes used to happen, mass strikes used to happen. So it's about negotiation between the PRs or personal department or personal management department alongside with maybe trade unions, be it externally supported or internally. It's about negotiation. But HRM, if you see, it's about facilitation. It's about how you facilitate growth, nurturing, development, the next level for each individual, appraisal, training, all these forms part of facilitating the process to each individual. The key levers of further difference, selection. If you see the selection process itself, from a personal IR perspective, it was separate and marginal task, whereas in HRM, it's integrated as a key task. The pay, as we discussed, for example, job evaluation, it was based on grades. So, if a person reaches a grade, the grade structure of the salary was fixed. So that's how the pay used to be given. Whereas in HRM, it has to be performance based. That means then the concept of appraisal comes in. Conditions. If you see the conditions, it was separately negotiated. Whereas in HRM, they are well harmonized since this is an integrated system. Labor management. From a PM perspective, if you see the PPT, it's about collective bargaining contracts. Whereas in HRM, it moves towards more to individual contracts. The second point of difference, thrust of relation with stewards. If you see from a personal perspective, it is regularized through facilities and training, whereas in HRM, it was marginalized with exception of some bargaining for change models. So it was kind of bifurcated or more focused for individual growth and development. The job categories and grades, if you see from a personal department, at that point of time, the job function types were many. There was too many of hierarchy. So when you say of line managers, within line managers, it will be a junior manager, middle manager, senior manager, sub-superintendent, superintendent, senior superintendent. So lots of categories of jobs as far as whenever personal department was there. But if you see in HRM these days, the hierarchical pyramid for every organization has become more flatter. That means there are less hierarchy. So the job grades have become few. Communication. Now communication, there was always a restricted flow whenever a PM was there, for a simple reason because it was considered a separate department, whereas definitely it is with an increased flow in HRM because it's well integrated, it's an integrated system. Job design, if you see from a personal perspective, it was division of labor because we spoke of hierarchy, that itself means there is a division of labor. But if you see HRM, it's about teamwork. That's where in the last couple of years, a couple of decades, we speak more of team building. We speak more of unity. We speak more of family. We speak more of Kaizen. So when you speak of team building, it's about building blocks every day, not only as a business function, but also as individuals as well. Conflict handling, if you see, reaching temporary truces, that means it's about only handling petty issues, small time issues with a small vision. But if you see HRM, it's about managing the climate and culture of the organization. So what is climate and culture? We'll address this as we get there. But it's about managing setting up a culture for organization where employees thrive, excel, flourish, explore, go beyond their boundaries as well. Training and development, a big change in both these aspects. If you see, it was controlled access to courses. That means it was very specific to skill development. Maybe if a person is working on a job flow, a very specific skills that were trained if required. But if you see in HRM, the concept of learning has changed with multi-dimensions. The learning concept has moved to learning kind of company. So the entire organization is on a growth curve through a learning curve. So the focus is more on learning. That includes skill development, that includes having a new attitude or a fresh attitude every day, openness to change, having flexibility in job functions and mobility as well. The foci of attention for interventions, if you see how PM or HRM needs to intervene between individuals, it was more procedure based from a personal or IR perspective. But if you see from an HRM perspective, it was wide ranging, wherein there was a cultural structure about it and there were personal strategies about it. But it's more wide ranging than the normal way of interacting with employees. So in this huge list, we have almost saw around 30-40 odd differences between the job functions of an IR and an HRM. We'll also, and these were quite detailed. Now I caught lots of points as well, and we need to understand this, because when we understand its difference, we understand how HRM has actually moved in, yes or no. If you really look into those differences that we saw, you will understand how important the HRM function has become these days for any organization. In fact, if you are also aspiring to be in this function of HRM, you need to understand how the field or the domain has progressed. And that's the reason we have detailed a view and we have looked into how it has evolved in the last couple of decades. Now we will look into your PPT. We will look into a model of shift to HRM. So if you minutely go into the thing, it is first enhanced competition. Now this is the impetus. This is where it begins. Now, as we all know, in any market, any domain, topographic location, any segment, any business location, competitiveness has increased. So that's the impetus. So if competitiveness has increased, that means the employees need to be up for it as well. So this is a thrust that the external environment provides, enhanced competition. Now, this enhanced competition led to a strategic response. Now, strategic response is people who are designing the strategies for the organization. Now, if you see the graph, they have a set of assumptions and beliefs about it. Then there are line managers who sees the initiative with the change in dynamics, and there are also change in key levers. Now, change in key levers means where are the leveraging point for change. Now, the leverage points could be different. Now, suppose the change has happened. If you see enhanced competition, the change has happened because of technology. For example, a competitive player has introduced a new technology, and that new technology is helping this business function or any company more. So if some other player is also playing in that market, he will think, okay, if somebody else is doing it, we also need to change that if we want to remain in the marketplace. Otherwise, it will be a tough ask. So with these in response, if you see the graph, based on the strategic response of beliefs and assumptions, line managers into action, and the key leverage points, there is a need for change in attitude and behavior that requires higher commitment, customer orientation, the focus from customer being the king, customer orientation, quality of the product, which obviously line managers take into action, flexible working. That means based on the business needs, the working hours also changes. So with this impacts along the competitive performance. So if all these things changes, if you see on your PPT, with the change in attitude and behavior changes, commitment, customer orientation, quality, and flexible working, change comes with competitive performance. And all these, if you see, has an implication for industrial relations. So this is how the model of a shift to HRM has happened, wherein earlier if you see the competitiveness of the market might not be so fast, might not be so thick, might not be so cutthroat. So with this kind of competition coming in, there was definitely a need wherein people development need to be shaped up, and that's where the PM or the personnel department or management started shaping up into an HRM or human resource management. Now, the other outline that we saw that what's a hard HRM and what's a soft HRM. So we'll look over one by one. The hard approach, if you see, is rooted in manpower planning approach, is concerned with aligning human resource strategy with business strategy. So it's about if you have a business function, suppose if it's a manufacturing unit who is into selling plastic wares, maybe they are into preparing the buckets, the tubs, stuff like that. So when we say about hard HRM, it's about identifying first the consumption of the location where the company needs to market the product. One, based on the requirement, they need to understand how much market we are going to cater. If that is the thing, what is the projected sale that's going to happen? That comes to a business vision and strategic planning unit. Then based on this, how much production capacity we need to install, and if this is the capacity that we need to install to provide to the marketplace, we need to understand how many employees do we need in a manufacturing unit, with what type of capacity, with what type of experience, with what type of